extending the model-driven app user experience. In this section, we would be covering two concepts, performing common actions with client script, and we would also see best practices with the client script. Okay, so when we talk about model-driven application can be customized with the help of client script. Now, what is this client script we are talking about here? We are actually going to use JavaScript in Power Apps to implement the custom business logic. Client scripting should be used as an alternative when declarative business rules do not meet the requirement. So basically, you have the business rules to implement your logic, but in case it is not helping you in implementing your logic, then you can look for this client scripting option. Basically, when we are talking about client scripting, these scripts runs on model-driven application form in response to form events. So what are the form events? Let me help you with that form events. So these are the form events: form on load, form on save, and column on change. Only three events are supported. Okay. So only these three on these three events we can perform some task. Just give me a moment. Okay. In addition, now we have this command bar button. I hope you remember that we have seen the command bar options also. So a command bar button can be configured to invoke a client script function when it is used. Okay. So if I talk about this client script task, common task which we can perform with the help of client script, it is given here. Get or set column values on the form. We can show and hide user interface elements. We can switch between forms where multiple forms are available for a table. Open forms and views interact with business process flow also. So you can do lot many things. You can see for doing this whole activity, you would be getting basically an interface, or you can say an API, and that API is here below. Okay, interacting with data, changes of the form content, or modification of the app behavior can be implemented with the client scripting using the client scripting API. And that client scripting API providing us XRM. From with the help of XRM, we would be able to access app, we would be able to refer to device, encoding, navigation, panels. Okay, web API is also given to interact with the data. So these all options has been given to us. I hope it is clear so far. Okay, let's talk about the next concept. Uh, Let me add some more information for these. So when I'm talking about app, these enables adding event handler for any app level notification. If we talk about device, it allows with consent access to device content such as image, video, audio, location, and anything else more around that device. Encoding, quick access to HTML and code decode functions. If we talk about navigation, provide uh, when I'm talking about navigation, it provides uh, platform independent navigation functions, including open dialogues, forms, files, and URLs. If we talk about the panel, displays the web page represented by a URL in the static area in the site pane, which appears on all pages in the this model driven application web client. If we talk about utility, collection of utility functions including access to metadata and several context objects, and Web API provides properties and functions to use Web API to create and manage records and execute Web API actions and functions. Okay. Okay, so I think we are good to go ahead. Let me move. When you created a script, what is that a script representing? So that a script we can upload inside the Dataverse environment within a solution also, and that creates a kind of web resource. So what is a web resource? Let's understand that. So when I'm talking about web resources, these resources are virtual file system that can be referenced by forms and buttons. You cannot upload files directly, but create a web resource and add the file to the web resource. So this is the way we are going to add the JavaScript file into the environment. So web resources are primarily used for JavaScript libraries in the model-driven application. However, we have other types of web resources also. Okay, so the pointers to know around the web resources, these are the files which are getting uploaded to the Dataverse basis under the virtual file system. It can be used in forms and apps, and most of the time used as a JavaScript library. But yes, other web resources are also supported, like HTML web resource, which would be a web page, CSS web resource, style sheet, XML format data if you have, images of these all formats. So these are the web resources which we can upload in the Power Platform. So to use client scripting on a form, the script must be first uploaded on as a JavaScript web resource. Okay, so for that perspective, what you are supposed to do, basically, you need to add a web resource, and once web resource has been added, then you would go to this option in the mod forms practical, like when you added the form. Okay, you go to that section and then you would click on add library, and then you would be able to add your JavaScript. Okay, you would be giving a name to your JavaScript, and you would be uploading the location, that where is your file. So basically this is the necessary step. So that web resource can be of JavaScript or TypeScript also. Okay, that can be TypeScript code as well. So when you have configured your JavaScript, or okay, one point I would like to add, when you are working with TypeScript, it has to be transpiled into JavaScript code only. Directly TypeScript would not be supported. Okay, so once configured as a script web resource, client script libraries can be associated with commands and form events. So basically, when you have done this step, you would find this add JavaScript section, and from this add JavaScript section, basically when you do it, you would find your file here itself, which is there in the web resources, and you would be able to upload the file easily. Then what is the next step? Next step is you need to register the event handlers. So there are basically two main methods to register the event handler to the form. One, you can manually go into the form editor, or in code on the onload event, you can register add on change or add on save. These are the ways where we can add event handles to the form. So in these sections, form based events would be handled. So these are the event handlers: form on load, form on save, and column on change. Okay, so what is the process you need to be following? Okay, first of all, add JavaScript library to the form, and before that step also you would be adding your JavaScript library as a web resource. It is important to understand because in the exam it could come like sequence the steps. Okay, so add JavaScript library to the form, then add event handler. That is the second step. After adding the event handler, then select the event on which you wanted to register that event. Then you need to enter the function name manually. It is important to note that you need to enter the function name. Okay, and manually you have to do that. And then you should be selecting the pass execution context as a first parameter, so that execution context would reach to the JavaScript so that you can perform some modification on that particular form with the help of context. Okay, so there are mainly five steps: add JavaScript library, add event handler, select event, enter function name, and select pass execution context as first parameter. Client scripting logic runs as event handlers for form events. So you must register your event handler to have your logic executed. So what I'm talking about now, registration. So registration for common events can be done via the form properties dialog or from code. Some events, if you talk about, some events can only be registered from code. Event handler can run on multiple forms but must be registered separately for each one. Okay, so registering event handler using form properties create a static integration of event handler at design time. Okay, at design time it would be uh, registering. So each time the form is used, the same event handler will be configured to run each time. Unlike when you register the event handler with code, you can have logic determine what should be registered. So if we talk about the event handler for the following events, form, form if we talk about. So this allows you to register onload and onsave event handler. If we talk about tabs, this allows you to register events for each tab on the form for tab state change. Columns, this allows you to register an event handler if column data is changed. So from this section, you have the functions available. Okay, on save, on load. And here when you open this event handler section, you would be selecting the event type, you would be providing the library, then you would be typing the function, and you would be activating this property. This is the way you would be registering your event. So registering event handlers using code is possible for all handlers except onload, which must be registered using configuration which we have just seen. Okay, so onload handler can then be used to register other handlers in the code. And what all other handlers? Let me highlight that as well here. That is on change. Okay, that is we can register additionally. So in this example, on change handler on the account number, here it is. Okay, on change on the account number, we are registering and we are performing a notification code. So on load, we are registering another function. Okay, so basically, what is the step? Create a function that runs in onload of the form account form, and then you are adding or add on change to register the function to call when account number column changes, and register on account form properties the onload event handler. Let's understand what is execution context, because when you register your when you write your code, you would always pass this execution context, right? So when you register an event handler, you can have the execution context passed as a first parameter. So this particular section which you activate, it actually sends the execution context of the running form to the JavaScript code with the help of this parameter. Okay, that what is the benefit? Because you are having the execution context, you can play around the requirement of your custom logic. So that's the whole idea. So if I say it would be a good idea to always have this particular option selected when you register an event handler using form properties. When you register an event handler using code, this option is automatically selected. I hope it is clear. Now, one point I would like to add here, the most common use of execution context is to retrieve the form and the grid context also. We can have a grid-based functionality as well. So another useful method on this context is get event source. You can get the event source. So the event source returns a reference to the object that the event occurred. So this allows you to write a generic handlers that interrogate the event source at runtime to find out which control the event occurred on. And this can be helpful when you are writing one method that is registered on events for multiple controls instead of registering a separate event handler for each control. So let's understand the client API object model. So when creating event handler and using the client scripting API, you should be understanding it, right? The purpose of context object is to give you the information about the context your code is executing in. So getting the context is really helpful because it would allow you to create functions that are more generic and makes your functions less sensitive to the specific layout structure of the UI components you are working with. Okay, so if I talk about the execution context here, execution context for an event in the model-driven app, forms and grid. And for this, you need to pass that execution context as first parameter. You can have form context. So from reference to a form, and how would you get it? So you would say execution context dot get form context method gets the form context object. We have grid context. So in the grid context, reference to a grid or a subgrid of a form, or we can have XRM also, which is a global object for performing operations that do not directly impact the data and UI in the form. So this form context, if we are referring, which we can get from execution context that dot get form context, you can refer to data, you can refer to UI, and if you're referring to the data, you would get attributes, you would get entity, you can even work around the process also, business process flows. Within the entities, you would get attributes and controls. Within the process, you would get stages and steps. Okay, which is a kind of collection actually, because attribute list of attributes would be there, controls list of controls would be there. Within the UI you would have controls, within the UI you have form selector and you can look for items, quick forms, navigation with items, process, tabs. Under the tabs you would have sections, under the sections you would have controls. So you can actually refer to the complete uh, model-driven application-based form with respect to the data, also with respect to the UI also. Everything you can access within the JavaScript with these sections. So what is the correct way of doing it? The client API form context, which we were going to have from this particular code, execution context.get form context, it would provide a reference to the form or to an item on the form and replaces the XRM page. Earlier, we used to use XRM page, but now we can write the code very easily like this. Okay. So form context dot get attribute first name dot get value, you would be able to get the value of that particular first name attribute within the form. Let me just highlight the form types. We can have create form, we can have update, read only, disabled, and bulk edit form also. So whenever you are getting the form context, you would be able to get the form context, right? Once your form context is there, you can call this function get form type, and you would be able to find out what is the form type you are working upon. Okay, so as I told you that once you have the form context, you can play around the data. So if you are interested to access the data was column data, you can access it like access by name or access all attributes. If I'm talking about access by name, this is the way you can write. You can create a variable and you say form context dot get attribute with that particular name. Okay, if I talk about like I wanted to reiterate through all the attributes, you can create a all attribute variable or any name. You can say form context dot get attribute. It would actually refer to all attributes. So just see here, it is written assign an array of all attributes in the what data entity attributes collection to the all attribute variable. So you can iterate through, you can write a loop and you can access every attribute. Okay, so basically a data was column is represented in the object model as an attribute object. Just have a quick look what all tasks you can perform once you have the attributes, right? You can get the value, you can set the value, get the currently selected option object in the option set attribute. Okay, determine, so you just see code is highlighted here, so you can determine whether an attribute has changed in the user interface since the form has been opened. Okay, so just have a look. I'm not reading further. You can just look at it once. I'm just holding on the slide for a moment so that you can go through. You can see here, you can even set the required level. Submit mode is there. Privileges even you can set. I hope list is clear. So guys, be ready. Now we are going to have a small demonstration around this JavaScript with model-driven app. And although there is a lab also available which you can try, but let me show you a demonstration here now. Here is the demo which we are going to perform. So first of all, let's open Visual Studio Code. So we have already installed Visual Studio Code in our environment. Okay, let me do one more thing. Let me create a folder. So where I'm going to hold my file. So C drive, labs. I'm going to create a new folder here. Give me a moment. So I'm giving the name JavaScript code. So this particular location I would open in Visual Studio Code. So file, open folder, and I'm going to traverse to that particular location. C drive labs, and my folder is JavaScript code. Select that folder. So It's open. Yes, click on that. Yes, I trust that author. Okay. Now, if you see this interface, here is a new file option. Here it is a new file. Okay, within the JavaScript code folder, new file, folder, new folder. If you wanted to create a new folder, this is like refresh in case something you have created outside and it is not visible. So you can refresh, and this is the collapse option. So let me create a new file now. So I click on new file. I'm giving the name to my file, my script.js. So JavaScript file extension is .js. My file is ready to have the code. So what I'll do, I'll quickly, just to save time, I'm going to copy paste some code here. Okay, so this is the code which I'm going to execute. So let me help you to understand the code also. Just a moment. So basically, if you see this particular code, we are at line number 4, where example is equals to windows.example or a namespace. So we are kind of putting a check. Okay. And in that, we are going to create a function. Let me highlight those sections also. And here we are creating a, within the function, we are creating a my unique ID. Okay. Then we are getting the username xrm.utility.getGlobalContext dot user settings dot username. This way you would be able to get the current username. So with the help of xrm utility, I'm doing that. Then when I got the name, then I'm creating a message variable with the current username plus your JavaScript code is in action. So within this function, which is belonging to this example namespace, then I'm creating another function, form on load. So within the form on load, if you see here, form on load, I have this execution context also, right? So with the help of execution context, I can get the form context, right? So in line number 13, you can see execution context dot get form context. So this way I would be able to get the form context. And once we have the form context, we can work around, right? We can do lots many things. So we can set UI, set form notification. So we are putting up the notification with that message. Because it's a notification, we are sending that type also, whether it is info, whether it is error, we can do that as well. So I'm putting up that type as info, and I'm giving that unique identification for the notification. So that unique ID which we have written on line number 7, that is also passed in this particular function. So line number 16 is talking about that logic. So it would display a notification. Then on line number 19, we are clearing the notification with the help of this unique ID. It would be able to identify which notification we want to clear after 5 seconds. Automatically should clear. Then another function which we have created, just a moment, here it is, attribute on change. Okay, attribute on change. So for this attribute on change, we are saying let's first of all get the form context with the help of execution context, right? Then we are specifically going to work for account table. So form context dot get attribute for the account table name attribute we are fetching, and we are fetching its value. Okay, account name we are fetching. And here, when we are able to get the account name, where we are going to hard code here contoso, we are going to perform a kind of check on contoso basically. So after line number 27, you can see on 28th line, we are putting up a logic of search, whether, just a moment, here getting the value, get value, line number 27. Then line number 28 is going to fetch that account name. We're converting it to lower, and then search contoso. If it is not equals to -1, it means it is found. So if it is found, then what to do? So we wanted to fetch the form context, get the attribute website URL, and we are setting the value, set values of all these three: website URL, telephone 1, and description. So this is my get attribute on change function. I hope it is clear. Next is, it is little slow. I'm selecting something and I hope it is, this condition is also clear. It is going to return -1 if it is not found. Okay. Then next is line number 36, where we have form on save. On form on save, we are doing a logic implementation, xrm dot navigation dot open alert dialog. It would open a dialog box, and then we are at the last, we are calling the example, call example. So let me open the portal now, make.powerapps.com, so that we can see how it is going to implement it. So if you remember the steps, so first of all, correct environment. Let's go to the solution. So in the solution, we wanted to have the web resource. So I'm going to create a new solution for specifically this demos. So new solution I'm creating. Let me give the name. Let me associate a publisher also, and create the solution. Now my solution is getting ready. Okay, now I need to have a web resource. Give me a moment. So first of all, I'm including a table account, because this particular JavaScript code would work on account. So I've selected all the objects. So my table is there now in my solution. And here's the forms. But before that, I'm going to have new. Okay, no, I need to go to all first. Then new. More. And here is the web resource. So I'm going to choose a file here. So this window would help me to upload the JavaScript file. So choose a file. I'm going to traverse to the location where I have my file. I have selected my file. Let me give a display name also. My script, I'm giving the name. My script again. And here you can see the different types of web resources, right? Right now I'm going to select only JavaScript. You can add description also if you want. And then save. So web resource is also uploaded. Now my table is there, my web resource is there. What is next required? I have to configure the event handlers, right? So account table, forms. Here is my account main form. I'm going to select that account main form. So what is next step? I need to add the library in my form, right? So I'm going to add the library now. Here, form libraries, JS. Add library. You can see a dialog box and I am going to search my library here. And my library name was my script, right? So let me look for it. Let me search my script. Here it is. So select that. Add. So you can see kg underscore my script is visible. Okay. Now what is the next step? I would go for events. So here you go for events. Then onload event handler. You can see event type and my library is already visible. Here I'm going to type in the function name manually. So my namespace was example, right? So I'm going to type in example. It's not typing. Example dot form on load. And what is next? I need to pass the execution context as first parameter. So this is the configure section. So now I'm going to click on done. So this execution context is required, right? Done. So this is registered. Now let's for on save also. Event handler, similar step, only function name to be written manually. So I am going to write here also example dot form on save. And here as well, I would activate the pass execution context and done. So two events has been registered now, right? Now what was the next? On change. On change of what? If you remember, I was highlighting account name. So I select the account name column from the form and then I got events again. So account name selected, events. I go for events here again and here on change event is visible. So I have this event handler here as well. So event handler, let me go to the function name again here. So function name is example dot attribute on change. And here also I would pass the context and click on done. So I have configured my events in the JavaScript. I have registered the event handlers and now I'm saying save and publish. So once it is saved and published, I am ready to create my application for this particular table. So let it save. Then we would be okay. Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, I have a count table, right? So I would be able to create my application quickly. So let's go to the table again, select the account table. And now I'm going to say create app. Instead of going for that option, I'm directly going for create an app. It would quickly create an app for me, a model driven application it would create. So let me give a name here. Create my application is ready. I would say publish and play. So the events has been registered for the forms. So for that, I'm going to click on new. So it would open the form and you would see a notification. You can see here MOD administrator, your JavaScript code is in action. So that notification automatically gone. Then here account name, if I type in Contoso account name, it would automatically fill in some attributes below in the form. So let me try with that contour. So you can see automatically these values are filled up. Okay. Now set value is also working. Now when I say save and close, it should open a dialog box. You can say record saved dialog box. So my JavaScript code is working perfectly. So you have successfully seen that how to have a model-driven application working with JavaScript code, right? I believe it is clear. See here, so it would give you a good idea around the accessing the various controls. So basically, first of all, you need to refer to the form context, then get attributes, and then controls, and then get. It would give you a specific attribute control. Okay. Then if you wanted to access the control by name, you can get control and specify the control name basically. Then you can get all controls also. You can go for form context dot get control. So when I'm saying control objects, these are like attribute objects which have some like common set of method regardless of the type. So basically what kind of common methods? You can say get visible, set visible, false, true, right? So if we like if we wanted to understand whether that particular control is visible or not though, then we would go for get visible method, and if we wanted to set the visibility true and false, we can go for this particular method. Then if we wanted to get the reference to the attribute for the control, you can see here we can say get control name and get attribute. If we wanted to disable or enable all the controls for an attribute, just see we are a kind of for each we are running, and then we are applying that logic what we wanted to do. Okay. Then change the label for a control. This is the way you can change the label for the control. Set label function is available. You can get the parent of a control, and even set focus function is available. Now let me help you with the functionality for the tabs and sections. So when you create a model-driven application, you can have tabs, and within the tabs, you can have sections. So you can play around the tabs and sections also. What kind of code you would write? You just see form context, UI, tabs, get, and you're providing the tab name, and then you can say set visible false or true. Okay. If you wanted to change the label of the tab, again, you need to get the tab, similar code, and then set label. Show and hide a section, so you need to get control. Okay. And that control get parent, and then you can set the like there could be other options also, but what we are doing for a particular control, its parent would be a section, and for that section we are providing the set visibility true or false. Okay, this is the way you can play around with the tabs and sections. So in your lab exercise, you would be working on the tabs actually. Let's see how to work around the entity data. So basically, if you look at this particular table, this particular table contains methods that you can use to get information about the current record. So for example, you wanted to get the ID of the current record. This is the kind of code you would write: form context dot data dot entity get ID. Okay. If you wanted to save a current record, you would say form context dot data dot entity save method is available. Determine whether any data in the current row is changed. So if it is changed, it is considered as dirty. Okay. So yeah, it's dirty. So form context data entity get is dirty. Okay. So you can see whether a particular row has been changed or not. If you remember, we have discussed about a table where we were talking about the XRM also. So if we talk about the XRM, it helps you to conduct global operations with the client API, and that client API provides us the XRM object. So the client API provides a globally accessible object which is available for use in your code to perform variety of activities. So XRM section, okay, device encoding, navigation, panel, utility, web API. So we wanted to check whether it is offline or online. So these all which right now coming in green, these are the new add-on in this API. Okay, so we are going to explore little bit around the information around that as well. So here we are talking about XRM.web API object. This object provides properties and methods to use web API for traditional CRUD operations. I hope you know or you remember that CRUD operation: create, read, update, and delete operation within a client script. So if you wanted to create a record, create record method is available, delete record, retrieve multiple records, update record is available offline. So if you wanted to check whether that particular table has been marked offline capability, this is important to, if you have not marked, it won't be available. So is it available offline? You can check. Execute method would be useful when you want to run a single action or a function or a CRUD operation. Okay, and execute multiple like a batch. So run a collection of actions, function or CRUD operations. These are the methods which you would get in web API object. Okay. Let's see now the best practices with client script. So we are now familiar with how to use JavaScript code for customizing the model driven application. Now it is good to know the best practices with the client script. So while developing or referencing related data is a common practice, right? So you should be. So if you need to reference data that is contained in a related table, such as the address of the primary contact on an account, you will need to use client script and the web API. If you see here logic part, so logic needs to run on the form save event. However, if business rule is possible to implement on your logic, it is recommended. But in case of client script, you would need to implement the logic on the form save event. So business rules only run on form load actually. If you wanted to have any event to be executed on save, then you can go for client script. On change of a column also, business rule can work, right? If you need business logic to run on save, you need to use client script. If you are looking for complex conditions, if your condition has multiple and statements or requires or statements, it might be more efficient to write these types of conditions in client script than through business rules. Okay, last point for working with client scripting. So cleaning data from a form column isn't easily accompanied by means of business rule. You cannot clear the data. Okay, so while these are workaround that can be achieved by assigning dummy columns that always contain null values, this is more elegantly accomplished through client scripting. So client scripts might be seemingly easy task to seasoned JavaScript developer. It is important to keep best practices in mind when considering their use. So you should take care of these points. If you're referencing related data, if you wanted to have a logic on save event, or you have a complex condition, or you're looking for clearing of the form data values, then you can definitely go for client scripts. See here the quick comparison. So basically, business rules are an available feature in model-driven application that enables users to conduct frequently required action on a form based on certain requirements and condition. Specifically, if you remember, business rules have 7 actions allowed, right? So what all actions? Set column values, clear column values, set column requirement level, show or hide column, enable or disable column, validate data and show error messages, and lastly, create business recommendation based on business intelligence. While the available framework, the JavaScript, is robust, some scenarios might exist where business rule cannot fully achieve a given requirement. So luckily, these cases, client scripting can narrow the differences between business rules and a more custom requirement. So here, if you explore some common limitation that user experience with business rules, where client scripting might still be better solution, where all options, just have a look here. When you want to have a logic to be implemented only on model-driven application form. If you are looking for operates on column, section or tabs, business rule cannot work on the column, section or tab. If you want to use web API to access any table column, okay. If you wanted to work around the command buttons, if you have complex logic to support, you wanted to perform some activity on save, or you wanted to have some notification, like when you save any record, you wanted to have a dialog box prompting that okay, record is saved. So in our example we have seen that, right? Business rules should be used when you wanted to have some logic for model driven app or form and dataverse, or you wanted to operate a logic only on columns, basically because business rules are limited to the columns of the table or form. You can show error next to the field only, and these events run on load and on change only, and you can have recommendation, which I have highlighted already, right? So you think in which scenario you need what. In the model driven application, we have also explored business process flows, right? So this particular slide would help you to understand that when you have a business process flow, you can have JavaScript and business rules. So actions on the columns with a business rule or with JavaScript performs the same action on corresponding step in the business process flow. What all steps you can perform within the business process flow with the help of JavaScript or business rule? Set visibility or set value. Let's see the comparison on the calculated column versus client script as well. So calculated column is also kind of logic implementation where like I wanted to perform some of multiple columns and then column values, and then I wanted to result something, right? So if we talk about uh, the calculated columns, these columns are calculated on retrieve. So here it is, calculated columns are calculated on retrieve. So client changes won't show until data is refreshed. However, when we are talking about client script are actioned immediately in the user interface. So what is your preference? You can decide. Let's see now coding standards and some best practices. So it is recommended you should have a unique script function name. Therefore, the functions that you write will most likely to be loaded into a form with many other libraries. Okay. So if another library contains a function that has the same name as the one you provide, whichever function is loaded last is the one that will be defined for that page. So to avoid conflict, make sure that you use unique function names. So that is one of the coding standard which you should follow. You can use the following strategy as I displayed on the screen. So if you or your organization does not have any already established, what you can do, you can go for unique function prefix. You can add some prefix in front of the function. Okay. A unique prefix which define each of your function by using the standard syntax with a consistent name that includes a unique naming convention which you wanted to use. Another thing which is possible, you can have namespace library. So associate each of your function with a script object to create a kind of namespace to use when you call your function as here, whenever you have the requirement. Okay. So here is the code for namespace library concept. So what you can do, you can have the namespace check. Let me see, highlight that. So what you can do, if type of my unique name is undefined, then I wanted to define. Okay, otherwise in that particular namespace, my function need to have the function coding. So this is your function coding. So when you use your function, you can specify the full name, that namespace, then the other I would say container, and in that container what exec function you are executing. So this is your function, perform my action. Okay, you can make use of that approach also to avoid conflict. Here are some more best practices. The very first is avoid unsupported method. So while a few third-party resources on internet might suggest or have examples of how you can use unsupported methods to perform certain action, but this is highly unadvisable because these methods cannot be guaranteed to work in future version of your app and might contribute instability of your implementation. So therefore avoid unsupported method. Another thing to avoid is avoid using jQuery in forms and ribbon commands while accessing through web page resources. So jQuery is not supported within form script or ribbon commands. It is highly advised that you restrict script to only use methods that are found in the client API object model. Okay, so we have already seen the client API object model. You should use that only. So this was our second point. Third point is write non-blocking code. So when I'm saying write non-blocking code, what does it mean? When performing queries or process intensive activities. Okay, so when you are having these activities, make sure to use asynchronous patterns to ensure a non-blocking user experience. The fourth best practice is write code for multiple browsers. So as you know, we have multiple browsers. We might be using Edge, we might be using Chrome or Firefox. And if you have ever worked with HTML, you might be knowing that as well, that you can write the code for multiple browser. So ensure that any script that you write have been tested to work against almost all the browsers that are supported by model driven application. Okay, that is important to test. So these are the some best some best practices which you should follow. So almost every browser have some sort of debugging extension that allows for debugging of client script. So what you can do, you on the Edge, you can have F12 to look at the developer tool. In Chrome also F12 works. In Mozilla Firefox, we have Firebug, and in Apple Safari, you have Web Inspector to look at the client scripts which are running behind your application to debug. So when your developer tool is opened, okay, so how would you work ahead? So basically when your model driven app for page is loaded, all client script libraries are loaded alongside the web page as individual script resource. So given the volume of script resources that are needed to run a model-driven application, it can be difficult to locate a given file that you might want to debug against. So when using debugging tools like Microsoft Edge, we commonly recommend that you note your file names and use the tooling search capabilities to locate your script file. Okay, so this is the way you should be working around. Another approach for troubleshooting the code, you can go for message option. You can make use of this windows.alert method, or you can use this console.log method to perform the testing. Okay. it is better to use, I would say it is better to use console.log, because this log would be recorded behind the scene. It would not prompt the execution. It would not stop your execution in any means. So this I would recommend. Another tool which is there is Fiddler autoresponder. Okay, so constantly editing web resources when they are under development and can prove to be difficult and time intensive when you have to republish the files within a solution upon every edit. So in such a situation, you can use Fiddler to support you, to look at what is happening, is it responding or not. Okay, so there are several other third party tools